Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show. The show is designed to give you solutions to your day-to-day management and leadership problems. It's hosted by Matthew Haddock, a frontline manager and leader with over 25 years of experience. If you're ready, then let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show. I do hope you're well and getting the results through your team, because that's what it's all about in leadership, getting the results with your team in the best and safest way. Today I want to talk about a subject that comes up quite a bit, because you will hear it all the time. The amount of time someone goes, "Oh, I assumed that were done. Oh, maybe that's done. I'm sure it's been done." And this is the idea of assumption being the mother of all failure. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you are in a business, and even in life in general, there's times when people make assumptions. An assumption in a workplace can be fine, minor little things, but there can be quite big ones. When people assume a task has been completed, but it hasn't. It's been usually done by somebody else. Teams may assume someone else owns it, owns an action. Then what happens? It don't get done. There's no clear assignment of responsibilities. You get this idea of familiarisation of people. So they assume it's been done that way all the time. Then they never get round to checking it. And then obviously it fails and develops a blindness to the risks. When problems don't get to root cause, people then assume and accept a certain way of doing it because we've always done it that way. How many times have you heard people say that at work? We've always done it that way, and it's never been a problem until it is a problem. So it's never a problem until it's a problem. And they can have this lack of verification, and that often turns small oversights into major incidents. You reflect on something, you've left it this time, it's okay, it worked. You leave it a bit longer, it's still working. The little patches, the cardboard engineering, the fixes, the bodges, they get left. And organisations then sometimes miss these things right up to the top. And what happens is massive failures. Think of some of the big failures. And I was listening to a podcast the other week, because I do listen to podcasts as well as broadcast podcasts. And if you do get a chance, there is some great stuff out there that's worth listening to wherever you get your podcasts from. I find it, a lot of history podcasts are quite useful, because what happens in history? Well, of course, you get a lot of problems that you can find in history. But if you think of the one that I really like is Cautionary Tales with Tim Harford, and he did one on around the Herald of Free Enterprise. So if you remember the Herald of Free Enterprise, that was a ship, unfortunately it sunk, and I was only young when it happened, I think 86 or 87, and it sunk, it tipped over on the way out because one of the crew members had fallen asleep, hadn't shut the doors, and nearly 200 people killed in there. And when you look at it, when they went through the investigation and they found out what was the actual cause, lots of things went wrong on that time. People had assumed somebody had shut it. There was no checks made on the bridge. All these things led to a major disaster that killed people. And it went all the way to the top when you look at that. And if you get a chance to listen to Tim Harford's Cautionary Tales, well worth a listen. Other things that you can think about, the Tenerife air disaster, it was 1977. There was loads of assumptions there. There was a crash between two planes, two Boeing 747s, killing 580 people. One of the biggest disasters, and it was actually on the ground, from an aviation point of view. And that's where one of the pilots, assumed he was cleared to take off. The crew members assumed the runway was clear. The communications were just not clear enough. All these things, and they had to make quite a bit of changes to that after. And that's what you've got to learn from these mistakes: is when things go wrong, it's okay blaming the person, the lowest one. If you think of the Herald of Free Enterprise, they blamed the guy who didn't shut the doors, fine. But there's all the other things. They'd been warned about it. They had near misses. And it'll be the same in your businesses. There'll be near misses all the time. And if you're not acting on them and you're not doing something about them, eventually they'll bite you. Same with the Boeing 747 crash. They changed the way that the crew was managed and trained so that the pilots were encouraged to challenge decisions and challenge people further down the ranks. And that's what you want to do in your business, is challenge them. If you think of Challenger disaster and the NASA, 86-ish, the engineers and managers had seen that O-ring that failed, damaged many times. People just assumed, well, that's fine. It worked before on previous launches. I'm sure it'll be okay. But of course, that normalisation of that defect then within 70 odd seconds of takeoff, 7 people were dead. It blew up, biggest thing. Lots of changes after that. Although there was a lot of near misses and a lot of finger pointing, that to strengthen their safety oversights, the engineering concerns were made better, more visible. That's why you should never stop people raising things, even if they're small and they think they're minor. Don't turn them down. I had a challenge, really good challenge from one of my people recently, but I wasn't wearing a high-vis in a high-vis area because I was walking through, thought it'd only be 2 seconds. Great challenge. I have to be the person doing the right thing. So wear the high-vis because there's a chance you might get caught by someone in that area. So think of that. And there's lots of other ones where you can become, blind to it. So, people do come blind to those risks, especially being there a while, and if someone else has done it and someone else has done it in the past and that person's not in. So there's lots of things you need to do to change the way your mindset works. So first thing I'll be doing is when you have near misses, have a system to gather them. So that might be a formal system. Good idea to gather those things. Encourage people to spot risks and raise risks. There's no criticisation of that. You've got to make sure people are allowed to raise them, feel comfortable talking to you and the leadership, have them gathered, have a system of KPIs around them. Never allow, even if it's across departments, if someone is seeing some other department that doesn't sound right, look right, it's probably not. I did a course, I think it was IOSH, safety course, and the instructor really stuck with me. He said, if it looks dodgy, it probably is. It's dodgy. And you know that yourself. Someone's hanging off a ladder at work. Someone's going through a door without looking. It's dodgy. How can you reduce that risk? And the assumptions that other departments have done those checks, how do you make sure you've got a check and a check and a check? And boss of mine, great boss of mine, he once said to me, and I was a young manager then, he said, if it's raining, someone tells you it's raining outside, go out and have a look. And at first I was like, no, I'm a manager who, empowers my team and trusts my team. And they'll come and tell me the truth. And the older and longer in the tooth, the more experience you get, there is a point where you get off your bum, you go have a look. I think I've done a podcast on it before. Get off your backside, go and have a look because you'll see it in your own eyes. Go see where them parts are. Go see where the problem is. If there's an accident, go see what's happened. Have we missed anything in there? Don't assume that maintenance are going to inspect that equipment. Make sure you got checklists in there. Don't assume colleagues have all the information you have because they won't. Make sure your communication channels. Assuming a risk has been logged before, that's not a good way to do it. If it's been logged before, it might have got lost. Log it again. Make sure you do it. And it's always been fine before is one of the traps people fall into. It's always been fine before. And then what happens? People start to skip the checklist because it's never a problem. They accept the equipment's a little bit dodgy, as I said, a bit dodgy. Be right, though, it's never had any problem before. You ignore the near misses, as I said. Outcomes are then drift, the standards of drifted away, and unsafe practices soon become a problem. There's another trap you can fall into. Nobody's raised the concern. Assume that a silence means it's fine. On the Herald of Free Enterprise disaster, going back to that one, the person who was closing the door should tell the captain if the doors aren't closed. But if that person isn't there to close the doors, who would be there to tell the captain there was a problem? They didn't hear there was a problem. Captain thought the doors were shut. Do you see what I mean? That's that assumption that the other department's doing it. The assumption that the silence is an agreement, everything's fine. You assume people will speak up. Sometimes people don't speak up when there's a problem. Especially if you're working in a multicultural society. Some cultures don't challenge management. Some cultures are acceptance of a hierarchy, so they would never challenge. They would assume you know everything. They assume the management are aware. The problems become hidden. They become there because the risk isn't being challenged, and then all of a sudden there's a really serious problem. And when I mean a lot of these have been disasters which have been life-lossing, a lot of these disasters can be things that affect your product quality. Something hasn't done and it doesn't get checked, and the only time you find out is when the customer raises a complaint. And sometimes you get complaints and you can be very complacent with complaints. Oh yeah, that's just the customer complaining. They just think it tastes funny. That's fine if it's a food product. Oh, it's always had that little defect. Well, you start looking for trends, you start to see things happening, and all of a sudden you start seeing there is a problem, and that can lead to a real one. So it doesn't have to be a safety issue, it can be a quality issue. And of course, customers might just not even raise it and never come back to you. That's the worst one, isn't it? The silent customer who never comes back. So we've got to try and prevent assumptions based on failure by having good practices. You have clearly assigned ownership of everything. You use your written actions to track and name individuals and make sure they understand what's going on. You train people to spot and be open to it. You use your checklist for critical tasks, but you encourage people to challenge and question whatever that might be. And sometimes you have to park your ego as a manager and accept that sometimes good challenges, in fact all the time good challenges are good for you. Then review your near misses and your quality near misses. What lessons can be learned? Where can you verify it by auditing? When can you go and when should you go, I say a lot, to go out and see if it's raining? You need to create that culture where I thought someone else had done it isn't acceptable. Don't assume, verify. That's a big thing I'm trying to get here. Simple rules, don't assume, verify. Most major workplace failures are caused by people not deliberately doing something wrong. Normally that's not the case. It occurs when individuals make reasonable assumptions of whatever they know, and the failure is to not verify them. And everyone believes someone else has done something, and that's when you got it. So make sure that you don't assume, you verify as much as you can, because that's going to help you get there. Create a culture that has feedback loops, that allows people to give you the information. And as a leader, last point, if someone tells you it's raining, go and have a look. Well, that's it for the show this week. I'd love to hear your feedback, as it's an amazing gift for me. So please give your feedback to managermattpodcast@gmail.com or put it in the comments, and I will get back to you if you want to more about this show or any other shows, or if you just want some ideas or even just questions about what you or I could do to help you. Just send us a message. And you know what it is? The best thing, it's all free. Don't cost you a penny. Well, that's it for Manager Matt this week. Thank you so much for listening, and goodbye.
Thank you so much for listening to this Manager Matt podcast. We hope you found it interesting, helpful and actionable. One last thing, please leave a quick review on iTunes or with your podcast provider, as it helps to spread the word of Manager Matt. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast, and if you did like anything in particular, send an email to managermattpodcast@gmail.com or visit managermatt.co.uk for more content. Feedback is a gift, so let's keep giving. See you next week.